I'm Savannah,
And I'm Sterling.
and this is In Memoriam.
And this week we're talking to Savannah about her mom.
About my mom. This week's kind of special. About my mom. So, her birthday was yesterday.
Yeah.
Cinco de
de Sissy.
Mayo. Yeah, we always called it Cinco de Sissy. And for a little bit, she let me believe that all those parties were for her because we ate so much Mexican food.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's kind of wild. My mother had a very interesting sense of humor.
It checks out because I eat Mexican food on my birthday too. So,
You didn't, well,
you know.
well, we ate it all the time.
Yeah, that's fair. We
All
live in
the time.
Texas.
Well-
but
She used to tell us all the time that we were Texicans.
yeah.
I said, okay, Mom, we are. And I guess, it tracks.
Yeah. Ain't too far off.
Anyway, so, sis, if you ask the federal government, her name is Marla. Marla K. Not K-A-Y.
Just K.
Just the letter K.
All right.
Marla K. Spurgeon was her maiden name. But she didn't like her name. And somehow she started going by Sissy. And
Okay.
for those of us that were close to her, just Sis. She kind of did everything her own way. It's no surprise that she named herself, because
Yeah.
she always just kind of did everything her own way. Mom was good at everything. She could catch a fish in a dry bar ditch. She was a very accomplished equestrian. She shot competitively and always won.
Yeah.
She could juggle. She
Okay.
had a special way with animals and could just get them to do whatever it is she wanted them to do. She always told me that you can't make an animal do anything, but if you ask them the right way, if you just ask them the right way, they'll do it. And she was right.
Yeah. I wish she could have met that lady that got those cats to jump through the hoop of fire the other day. 'cause
Listen.
She ain't wrong. That lady just begged that cat for about a minute and a half.
That's right. If you just ask them the right way, they'll do it.
Yeah.
She could. When I was a kid, we had this Australian Shepherd named Katie,
Mhm.
and she taught Katie how to jump through a hoop. She taught Katie how to do all these tricks. Like bang, and Katie would fall over like she was dead. She taught Katie to count. Katie could do a little bit of math. I don't know how she did that. One time I remember Mom and I had taken a road trip to Austin, and we were in traffic, and this dog was hanging out the window, like dogs tend to do, and she just randomly looked at me one time and said, "Savannah, do you ever feel like animals have something to tell you?" And I think she probably had some kind of mental way of communicating with them.
Yeah.
She always had some kind of critter that she was cultivating. It was kind of extraordinary to watch.
Yeah.
She could grow anything. Old ladies I grew up at the dead end of a dirt road. And my mother had such a beautiful, beautiful yard that old ladies would come out on Sundays just to come look at her yard, just random, that we didn't even know. I guess they told their friends or something. I don't really know how that happened. But she was always very proud of her yard. She kept a nice yard. One time she won Yard of the Month. Which is kind of spectacular when you think about you don't live in town, nobody's driving by your house.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
It's
Yeah.
something.
It is something.
So, Mom's family's from Wortham, a little town south of here. And she spent her time growing up in between Wortham and Channelview. Her daddy was working on the railroad, and that's how they ended up in Channelview. But she grew up on a little farm, and she always had a horse. I think her first horse was named Sam. And she was the middle child of three, and her older brother, Mark, used to always make fun of her and He would say Sam was just an old nag, and he would always say, Sam's got a foot in the dog food can. And it'd make her cry and cry. It'd make her cry so much that she remembered to tell me about it when she was an adult. You know, that kind of that kind of stuck with her. She had this, when my mother was a little girl, she had a lisp and had to go to speech therapy. And she had this old rooster that she had befriended. And his name was Mr. Rooster, as she explained to me. And her mother would get so mad at her. Mama would take that rooster in the house and would just be rocking him in the living room. And my grandmother would say, get that rooster out of my house. And she would go, shh, he's sleeping. She got away with everything. So she grew up on that little farm, and then they ended up in Channelview. She's got wild stories about working at Astro World and running around Houston. She had this old MG convertible that was an absolute rag. And luckily, all the men in her family were master machinists. So they kept that car running for her. But it would break down all the time down in Houston, and they were always having to drive from Wortham down there to go rescue her in this old MG. And finally, my grandmother looked at her daddy, my great-grandfather, the old man, and looked at her and looked at him and said, do not fix this car again. And it sat in the shop, never to be moved ever again. Ever. As far as I know, it's still sitting in there. Mama's MG.
Yeah.
She loved that car. Anyway, after that, she kind of, she went to high school in Channelview. She was a cheerleader on that cheerleading squad where that lady hired the hitman to kill that other gal's mama.
That is crazy.
Yeah, some Texas lore for you.
Yeah.
That was kind of a weird thing. And I remember when that happened, and I remember that happening and my mother telling me, I was on that I was the captain of that cheerleading squad. Which was funny because she didn't care anything about sports. Could not give a shit. She always just kind of saw it as a reason to do backflips and tumble around. And she told me a story one time. Their colors were like blue and gold or black and gold, something like that. They were the Yellow Jackets. And the other team had the same colors, but, their jerseys are flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And somebody made a touchdown, and she started running down the sidelines doing cartwheels and stuff. And she got all the way down to the end, and she turns around, and her whole squad is just standing there looking at her with their hands on her hips. It
was the other team?
Because it was the other team. She didn't care.
It happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
Mama. So anyway, so she did the Channelview thing and finally ended up back in Wortham and was working. This is kind of around the time that I came, into the picture, I think. I don't know, I was little.
And you're your mom's only kid, right?
I'm my mom's only child. I'm my mother's only child. She was working for some radio station. She did that for a while. And then she went to work for a CPA named David Kangas. And I don't even really understand what she did for him. I think she was like his repo man or his henchman or something. One time when I was real little, I remember going to Dallas to repo a Rolls Royce out of somebody's storage unit. And that was about the time that the Grey Poupon commercial. Do you remember those? Do you know about the Grey? Okay, you're young. So there used to be these Grey Poupon mustard commercials. And the whole shtick was, pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon? And all these random situations. And my mother thought that was so funny that I remember the whole time riding back from Dallas to Mahia, she would just periodically come out with, pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon? She'd get real fixated on these little phrases that she thought was funny. She loved, like, British comedies and stuff. And one of her favorite ones was Keeping Up Appearances. And it's this older couple, and the wife's kind of a nag. Her name is Hyacinth. And I think her husband's name is Jeffrey. And they'll be driving down the road. And anytime you see a person that could be 2 miles down the road, she would say, mind the pedestrian. And my mother used to say that quite a bit. Mind the pedestrian. Or do you remember the coconuts in Monty Python?
Mm-hmm.
The swallows.
Yeah.
My mother liked to randomly look at me and go, "Coconuts in England? How did those get here?" In her little British accent. She had a very good sense of humor. She was always messing with me when I was a kid. One time she had me convinced that we were aliens, and I knew in my heart of hearts, Sterling, that I was not an alien, but I didn't want to let her know that just in case she was, because then maybe I didn't belong to her.
Right.
She told me that she found me under a rock, and she tried to put me back, but I kept holding the rock up, so she had to take me home. Just warped sense of humor. She would sit me on her lap and take a flashlight and hold it up to my ear and go, "Oh, Savannah, girl, I hate to tell you this, but you got no brains." You got no brains. And maybe that's why I like playing with little kids all the time, because, you just tell them funny things.
Yeah. And they go with it.
And and I did, obviously, because I played along that I was an alien for quite some time. I've got this side note. I've got these weird little divots in my head right here.
Yeah.
And up until probably the year that she died, I remember sitting on the porch with her and being like, "Mama, what are these weird little divots I have in my head?" And she just took a moment and looked at me and said, "Now, Savannah, that's where your antennae are going to come out when the mothership gets close." She played the long game with that one. My whole life.
Maybe you are.
Maybe I am. Maybe I am.
Could explain some things.
Maybe I should have listened to her. It would explain some things. But it definitely explains her interesting sense of humor. And I appreciated that about her so much. She had a wonderful laugh, and she was quick to laugh. And that's a nice attribute,
Yeah.
So anyway, Mom's working for David Kangas, repoing Rolls Royces. One time she went to Alabama. He sent her to Alabama to repo a whole carpet mill. I don't really know how you do that, but...
So there's just some Texan lady in there yelling at people.
Yeah, and she's tiny. She's not very big. She's got a big personality. But
how do you commandeer a building?
I don't know.
A compound even.
You
know?
Mm-hmm. Full of employees and people.
Yeah.
But she was gone for a few months down there doing that.
Well, imagine just being at work one day and someone's like, "No, you gotta go."
Yeah, some little Texan girl named Sissy.
Yeah. Who are you?
Some little Texan named Sissy.
Yeah.
But my mother had the uncanny ability to make anybody do anything she wanted them to do.
Yeah.
I don't think she believed that about herself.
Look, growing up around horses, you learn how to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, with anything.
Do. A lot of silent communication.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta be real in tune with that horse if you're
Yeah.
I mean, you really do. You gotta learn how to communicate.
Let me tell you what she did to my stepdaddy one time. So, through the horse world, my parents divorced when I was about 2.
Mm-hmm.
And a few years later, she meets this guy, this real nice, mild-mannered, sweet Southern Billy from Mississippi. And he's about 15 years older than her, and he's a polygraph examiner.
Okay.
And they ran together for, 15 years maybe. I was in my early 20s when they split up. And through that relationship, my mother became a private investigator and later a polygraph examiner. And her best friend from polygraph school ended up at the Phoenix Police Department to run that polygraph unit. And he called my mama and he said, "I want you to come out here and help me." And she said, "Okay, but I'm bringing Billy." And he said, "Great." So Mom and Billy go out to Phoenix. They're working at that police department. She's out there for about a year. She's calling me every day. "Savannah, I hate it here. There's no trees. Savannah, I hate it here. There's no water. You know, they get all their water from
Yeah.
the Grand Canal, which is basically just a huge bar ditch that just runs through the
Yeah.
city. She was like, their water's coming out of a bar ditch, Savannah. It's barbaric. I hate it here. So I finally had enough of listening to her, and I just said, come home. Just come home. So I guess at that point in her life, she had had enough of Billy. And she tells Billy, I'm going home. And he says, okay, let me pack our stuff. And she said, no, you're staying here and I'm going home. So I go out there and get her. She comes back to the farm. About a month later, Billy shows up to get his things from the farm. And before he leaves, she has somehow talked him into buying her all new matching appliances. How does one do that?
I don't know. I'm still married to my wife, and I wouldn't buy her all new matching appliances.
There
know?
you go. I mean, that's just kind of
That's yeah.
the warped magic of sis. That was kind of strange. So let's talk about the polygraph examiner part, because that's what she did most of her life and was probably the most interesting job she had. So when she got with Billy, they opened up this private investigation firm in Dallas called Clue Investigations.
Mm-hmm.
And she did that for a while. She did a little bounty hunting for a while. And while she was doing the bounty hunting, so Mom specialized in like Texas 10 Most Wanted type cases,
Yeah.
big bonds. She wouldn't touch anything that wasn't a real big bond. And she had tracked this guy that was a member of the Mexican mafia. He was not a good dude. She tracked him to this house, and a lot of people don't realize this. Like, bounty hunters don't bust in doors and stuff. They call the cops and say, I've located your guy, come get him. Okay, so she locates this guy. She calls the police. They send their people over there to sweep the house, and a couple of bodies fall out that were pretty fresh. So he had not been gone very long. And about a week after that, his attorney contacts her and says, what would it take for you to quit looking for him? And she throws out a number, and he says, okay, you're going to have to sign an NDA and give me all your files. And she said, okay. But before she did any of that, she made copies of everything, gave them to the police, the policing agency, and said, here y'all go, have at it. Well, she was always afraid that she was going to get subpoenaed or get caught up in that legally, and she just didn't want to deal with that headache. So she fled to Oregon to go to polygraph school. I'm in 8th grade at this time.
Okay. So she was bounty hunting before she was polygraph examining.
On her private investigations license.
Okay. Because I was thinking that polygraph examining led into bounty hunting.
No.
So it was vice versa.
Yeah, vice versa.
Polygraph was an escape.
Polygraph was an escape.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting because there's some fun things that you can do as a polygraph examiner, like polygraph fishing tournaments.
Yeah.
And she was polygraphing varmint hunts.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
to see if people put weights in them or, yeah.
Yeah, make sure they killed them on the right day,
Right.
or, you know, things like that.
Making sure they were honest.
Right, making sure that just keeping everybody honest. And there were some definite adventures through those endeavors.
Right.
But the bulk of what she did was sex offender testing. And she would travel all over the state to different parole offices, you know, and run these tests on these sex offenders. And I was her transcriptionist from the time that I was a teenager until she passed. Really, I did it on and off. Every once in a while I would have enough of it because the subject matter is so heavy and just horrible that I would get tired of it, and I would tell her, I would say, Mama, I cannot do this anymore. And she would say, well, Savannah, somebody has to do it. And that hit me really hard, and I've always kind of been the somebody has to do it person.
And I'm sure a good chunk of that phrase in itself is why you accepted the position you have now. That's a rough job in itself in a different aspect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but my mother gave me that. You know, my
Yeah.
mother was very suck it up and do it. Just suck it up, get through it, and do it. And she did that for years running those sex offender tests. And I don't necessarily know that that was good for her. She had some things happen to her young when she was young that kind of shaped who she was, and that she never really got over. And I think her profession didn't really allow her to get over it
Right.
because she was reliving all that stuff
Yeah.
over and over and over again. But she definitely was doing a public service, and that's how she saw it, and she took it very seriously. She also took it very seriously to clear people. There were a few times that my
Right.
mother cleared some people and said, this guy did not do what it is you think he did.
Yeah.
And she was happy to do that.
Well, that's just as an important part of that job as convicting people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So she was happy to do that. My mother was very interested in truth and honesty and
Yeah.
fairness. And that's kind of what drove her life, I think. Truth and honesty and fairness. And she worked real hard to, distribute that wherever she went. I think she did a good job of it. But it was definitely a difficult profession.
Yeah.
But she was very accomplished at it. She was a great examiner. She probably her biggest professional accomplishment, if you asked her, would be that she was the first woman to ever be governor appointed to her profession's state licensing board. She was very proud
Yeah.
of that.
As she should be.
Yeah. So yeah, that's polygraph, sis.
That is crazy.
It is crazy that you just never know. She just kind of fell into it.
Yeah.
She didn't set out to do that. She just fell into it. My stepdad Billy had been a polygraph examiner for years and years. He was a Mississippi highway patrolman, and that's how he ended up in the industry. And it's just kind of weird, it's kind of a weird thing to do. There's not a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
But the real talent in polygraph is interrogation skills. You've got the instrument, and you read it, and the instrument is sound and all, but really it's the interrogation skills.
Yeah.
She told me one time, she was like, Savannah, when people tell you crazy things, just act like everything they say is completely normal, and that's how they keep talking. And I've employed that in my life, and she's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you start acting like things are weird, that's when people shut up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just act like everything is completely normal, they'll keep talking.
Yeah.
So, there's her trick.
Yeah. That ain't a bad one.
No, it's not.
Well, what's the word I'm looking for? What you were doing with her recordings.
Oh, when I was her transcriptionist?
Yeah, transcripting her recordings. Didn't like a year ago or so you
Yeah, okay,
get
so
to
let's talk about
yeah.
that. So this is kind of a weird thing. So my mother passed in 2016. She was 53 years old. Much, much too young. And we're coming up on about, I think this is year 9.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so back last year I get this notification from my Gmail account that you're fixing to run out of all your storage because I don't read anything or get rid of anything.
Right.
It said, here's some suggestions to clear out your storage, and it showed me all these large files that I had. And I had forgotten that she would occasionally email me audio files. I did everything with the dictaphone.
Right.
And I hadn't heard my mother's voice in probably 5 or 6 years at that point, maybe 7. And I clicked open, and there's my mother. And just like every time she talked to me, or every time she started a new audio recording, she would say, "Okay, Savannah," and then go in with what she was going to say. So it's kind of nice to have those. It's kind of messed up that they're sex offender reports.
Yeah, I'm sure the contents of, but it doesn't really matter what she's saying. It's the fact that you can hear her saying something.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's got to be, I mean, just so I've lost plenty of people in finding videos that you forgot existed, or, I mean, even pictures. It's just something. It lets you kind of relive just that little, just for a moment.
Just for a moment.
But it's worth it. And it's amazing that now we have all of it at our fingertips, and we don't have to carry around a video camera and a Polaroid, or, I mean, you know.
Or
we
even
can just,
have a special device to watch it on. You know,
right.
You don't have to have
yeah.
like I come from the time of VHS.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I have a handful of VHS in my closet of various things, but I don't have any way to watch it.
Right.
But I can't let go of them. So it's kind of interesting now that we do have all of that at our fingertips.
Yeah. And you know, we were talking the other day, and you were able to, you know, we've interviewed people like Andy, and Reverend Swearingen passed so long ago that everything he has is like old home video, and you know, you were sending me pictures that were taken on iPhones, and that's nice to. I mean, I know it's a whole different generation of law, like a whole different era of where we're living, but it's just nice to recognize that we have so much more available data.
So I'm going to tell you, my mother loved the internet.
Yeah?
Oh, yes. My mother was a conspiracy theorist. Like a real conspiracy theorist, and we prepped for Y2K, and
Yeah.
that's when I learned how to reload and bake a cake in the ground. And
Yeah?
yes, Lord. My mother was convinced that if money was no good, you know, we had to go to the barter system.
Right.
We bought so much tampons, because she said, Savannah, women are
Y'all
not
are
going to
set.
go. She said, women are not going to go without these things. This is going to be gold.
And women also probably aren't going to the store getting all this
we
Y2K supplies.
No,
you know?
well, I mean, I don't know, but that was her that was her plan.
Yeah.
That was her main plan. But yeah, she loved the internet. That was in the early days of the Drudge Report, and she just saw it as a big tool of information. You know, not just for funsies like we use it now, but she was convinced that the federal government was going to bust through our door someday because I had downloaded so much music.
No. Yeah, I get it.
She was terrified of that.
I understand. As a kid that pirated a whole lot of music, I understand.
And this is the days of dial-up when it would take you all day to
Get one song.
Get one song, and it was probably mislabeled.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
There is so much music on my old iPod that I thought was by this one, I mean, by a band, and I grew up and I'm trying to find this song, and I'm like, who the hell is Protest the Hero? I thought this was Godsmack, you know?
Completely mislabeled.
Completely mislabeled.
Yeah. So she just knew that was going to happen. I got in trouble a lot as a kid.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, my mother and I had a very complicated, difficult relationship.
What was your mother's form of punishment? What was her main one? Were you grounded or beat a lot?
Now let me tell you about how brilliant my mother was. So, again, this is the early days of dial-up internet, and my mother's office is up in Dallas, which is 90 miles north of the farm. And the way that she would ensure that I did not leave the house is she would make me read these self-help books. She would make me read these self-help books, and once an hour, I would have to email her a paragraph about what I had just read. And that is how she ensured that I stayed tethered to the house.
Smart.
Now, granted, I had a house full of my friends there, you know.
You had to read a
and I was,
every hour. Yeah.
I was good at reading quickly and
Well, you can read the night before.
ascertaining information.
Write out your paragraphs.
Right. Right. But that's how she would punish me.
Okay. I was just grounded like my entire childhood. I
Same.
mean, like,
Same.
genuinely probably 3/4 of it. And I'm sure my parents didn't know how to handle me, but I wasn't really that bad. I
Okay,
was
so
just running around
but
with
hold on,
girls
let's talk about that, about parents.
Yeah.
And they don't always know how to handle children. And you're the firstborn.
I'm the firstborn.
So my mother used to tell me, Savannah, they don't send you home with a manual.
Yeah.
And they don't. You know, I'm not a parent myself, but you are.
Yeah.
And when you are a new parent,
I was crazy. I was surprised how little information they give you before you leave the hospital with a baby
A
that
human
you
being.
can accidentally kill by not paying attention to it for too long is absurd.
Not
you don't
even
know
not paying
nothing.
attention to it. They can just like roll off of things and
I'll tell you, the sound of a baby's head hitting the floor is a sound you won't forget, and we heard it a couple too many times. But we got a little boy, and he's rough on himself.
and he's perfectly fine.
He's perfectly fine.
But yeah, they don't tell you what to do once you go home. So let's talk about that. My mother had me 2 months early. And they didn't tell her very much, I guess, because up until the time she had me, she was still riding horses and water skiing. And, you know, we lived out at a lake, and she would just stand on the bank on her water ski, and her friends would come by in the boat and throw her the rope, and she'd just ski off into, you know, the lake.
Yeah.
The doctor, I guess, didn't tell her, you know, sis, you don't need to be doing those things.
That.
No.
You're fine.
Yeah, no wonder I was early.
Probably what the dimples are.
That's
there,
probably is what my little alien divots are.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind
Who
of
knows?
stuff happened to me in there. But you know, you don't know what you don't know, and I'll tell you one of the things. So my mother had a difficult relationship with her mother, and her mother had a difficult relationship with her mother, and they all quit speaking to each other at different periods of time. And there was even a time period in my 20s where I quit speaking to my mother because that was normalized in my family.
Yeah.
You know, that's just what you do.
Yeah, it felt like a phase you were supposed to go through.
Yeah, you just cut your whole family off.
Right.
Which I'm going to tell you is terrible. Don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, don't do that. It does not feel good to be estranged from your family, no matter what's going on. It just doesn't feel good. And when I hit my mid to late 20s is kind of when I had the epiphany that your parents are not just your parents are just people. And everybody does the best they can. Nobody wakes up and says, man, today I'm going to mess my kid up, or today I'm going to be mean, or nobody really does that. Everybody's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And your parents are just people, and they're just doing the best they can. And when I had that realization is kind of when I started cutting my mom a lot more slack.
You gotta, you know, get slapped around by life a little to realize that it's hard on everyone.
It's hard on everyone.
Yeah. I mean, my parents started out with a family well before I did, and it had to have been way harder than what I waited till I was 25. Was intentional with when I had a kid, and I was kind of already cemented. My marriage was already a couple years in. Like, it wasn't the normal start to a family here in well, I guess we're not really small town Texas much anymore, but close enough, you know. Usually it's the other way around. You have a kid and you get married. But yeah, it's hard.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
No one knows what we're doing. You just got to figure it out. You just got to do what your parents did and try and improve on the things you can think to improve on.
Or do the opposite of what they did. That's fine too.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has to find their own way in life.
Yeah. But yeah,
my mother
raising
did not.
kids ain't easy.
I will tell you this though. My mother was not good about letting me find my own way. My mother was always telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And one of the strange things about my mother was that, this makes sense in a minute, she was real into astrology. My whole life, she was real into astrology. So if I ever ask you, if you ever run up on me and I blurt out, What's your sign? I come by it honestly because my mother, that's just how I was raised. So I'm a Libra
Mm-hmm.
and my mother is a Taurus. And Libra's ruling planet is Venus. And Taurus's ruling planet is Pan-Horus, but it has not been discovered yet. So in the interim, Taurus's ruling planet is Venus. And every once in a while, I would get really mad at my mother and I would scream at her, Mother, when you get your own planet, we will be okay. Because she was always telling me what to do. The
Yeah.
last thing that my mother ever said to me in this world, on her deathbed, she said, well, Savannah, what you need to do is, and then she never finished her sentence. And that was the last thing she said to me. But it was appropriate. She's always telling me what to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
It's kind of a mom's job, though.
I mean, I guess. Whatever, I do what I want. She didn't like that.
Yeah.
She did whatever she wanted. So I guess I get that from her.
Yeah. It's very fair.
Yeah, jacking with people, I get that from her, like little pranks and things. When I was a kid, my friends used to call me on the phone. Jonesy, if you are watching this, you're going to remember this, I hope. I had a little friend named Amanda Jones. I called her Jonesy. She would call me all the time, and my mother would pick up the phone, and she'd say, is Savannah there? And my mother would say, why, yes, she is. Thank you for asking. And then just hang up the phone and die laughing. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. It's a shame we don't have landlines anymore. We can't
Yeah.
mess with people like we used
I have
to.
a landline. I don't know the number.
At your house?
I do. I have where I'll call you from it so we can figure out what the number is. But yeah.
Do you have a phone?
Yeah.
Where?
It's in the office.
Why?
It don't ever ring because
Why?
I never
Why
had.
do you have a landline?
Because I'm sure they lied, but they told me it was cheaper to bundle it with my internet. So yeah, we do have a landline. It's just never been used, I don't think.
Well, too
Phones
bad.
never rang.
You should give me the number and don't tell Chris, and I'll start calling her.
Yeah.
I'll start calling her on it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, tell us about why we are filming today's episode in the cemetery.
Oh, okay. So, one, because we've decided that we are no longer filming in the sunroom.
We are no longer filming in the sunroom. It can be our backup
That's
for
right.
when we got bad weather days or whatever the case may be.
But we like to go places.
We like to go places. We bought these mics to go places.
Be mobile. So
we designed this setup the way it is to be mobile, and we're gonna do that like we originally planned.
that's right. So the reason we're in this cemetery today, this is the cemetery down from my house, and my mother, later in life, my mother and I ended up living together again. She got a wild hair and decided, this staunchly conservative conspiracy theorist Sissy, during the Obama years, decided that she just could not live here anymore.
Here, you mean America?
Here in America
Right.
anymore. So she has decided that she's going to be an expat and she's moving to Nicaragua. And at this time in my life, I'm living in this cute little 1-bedroom garage apartment at another dead end of a dirt road. I'm working at this little flight school at the local airport. I feel like I'm living in a Depression era flying circus. I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother calls me one day and says, well, I'm moving to Nicaragua. Can I come stay with you for a little bit until I figure it out? And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then a few months later, she calls me and does it again. And like mothers do, she wears me down, and I go, okay, fine. So she comes to stay with me. She goes to Nicaragua. She comes back, And she says, I cannot live there. It's a third world country. Well, no kidding, sis. What did you think it was? So she decides that we need to pull our money together and buy a house.
Okay.
I'm unmarried. She's unmarried. I don't have any kids. We need to pull our money and buy a house together. And once again, I do not agree to that quietly, kicking and screaming. That happened, but it happened. And in hindsight, it was a good thing. I had this old dog, this old basset hound named Patches,
Mm-hmm.
who went everywhere with me. Patches went to work with me. For a while, I did not have a job that my dog could not go to. We did everything together. And here comes my mother, and she decides that Patches' name is now Fatso, and she commandeers him. What are we going to do about this train?
We should pause this.
We're going to take a
Fatso.
train. We're going to take a train break.
We're on.
And we're back from the train break.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right. It's one of the beauties of living in this town. I love that train.
Okay, so Fatso.
Okay, so my mother has commandeered Fatso
Right.
and changed his name, which is also kind of ironic because I'm going to give you a little Savannah lore here. My mother got really mad at her mother when I was young because she didn't want to call me Savannah. So
Your grandmother didn't want to call you Savannah.
my grandmother didn't want to call me Savannah. So my mother's family, and this even kind of bled over on my dad's side, my family name is Sally.
Okay.
So if anybody ever calls me Sally, that's when I know they really know me,
All right.
because there's that.
Yeah.
But it's funny that she got so mad and then did the same thing with essentially what would be my child
Right.
and chose Fatso.
Yeah.
So my mother has commandeered Fatso, and she has talked me into living in this house with her, and she would come to this cemetery quite a bit. She used this cemetery, and this is such a lovely old pre-Civil War cemetery, like old growth trees, elevation changes. It's lovely. They keep it well.
Yeah.
She used this cemetery like a park, and she would walk my dog down here all the time. She really loved it here. It's kind of funny, when I had a few days before my mother passed to kind of ask her, because she was only 53. We never had the
Right.
discussion of, what do you want me to do with you? So we had a few days, and I was able to ask her, what do you want me to do with you? And she said, well, you could put me in that cemetery that I love so much, but you'd have to put me in the new park.
Yeah.
And it's not nearly as pretty.
It is not nearly as pretty.
But what a snot.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as pretty. And I said, okay, so we won't do that. What else could I do with you? And we kind of came to the agreement that I would have her cremated and take her places that she had been and that she liked, and places that we had gone, and just put her out, take her on
Yeah.
adventures, which really worked well, I think. You know, my mother had a very adventurous spirit. She liked to go on adventures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is the same woman that wanted to move to Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Also, when
Without looking into it too much.
Without looking into it too much. But I did find this notepad where she had written down, like, she also didn't speak a lick of Spanish. Like, she could order her tacos
Yeah.
and ask where the bathroom is and get a beer. And that was all she could do. So
Arguably all you need.
well, arguably. So I found this notepad amongst her things after she passed, which was all these phrases in Spanish that she was trying to teach herself,
Yeah.
you know, so she could, if she met a friend down there, so that she could communicate. I found out, well, let's talk about her adventurous spirit a little bit. You know, she wanted to move to Nicaragua. One time she won a belt buckle when she was a teenager. She was in some rodeo down in Houston, and she won a belt buckle steer riding. And I have this fabulous picture of her. It's my favorite picture of my mother, because I feel like it really embodies her spirit and who she is. And she was real proud of that. But it's funny because she kept that picture in that belt buckle in the kitchen pantry.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't on display.
Right.
Why it was in the pantry, I'll never know. But that's where it hung up when I was a kid. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty funny.
She was a mess now, and she tried to stay like current with the times. I remember one time when I was a teenager, we didn't agree on a lot of music and things like that. I will tell you though, she did give me Jerry Jeff Walker, and
Yeah.
I will forever be thankful for that, because that also gave me Guy Clark and led me on this whole path that kind of shaped a lot of who I am. But so my mama did give me Jerry Jeff Walker, but I remember I couldn't have been more than 15, 16 years old, and I had this old beat up red Ford Ranger with so many miles on it, it had turned over twice. And I pulled up to the house one day. I'd been riding around. I pulled up to the house one day, and I am blaring the Grateful Dead. I've loved the Grateful Dead since I was little. And randomly, I don't know how I even came across that, because neither one of my parents are into it. But I remember I pull up listening to the Dead, and I walk in the house, and my mother is in the living room doing the bye 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 dance to NSYNC on TRL. What was that about?
Yeah,
She's
that's
trying to
pretty funny.
stay with the times, I guess.
Yeah.
She loved Mary J. Blige. I always thought that was weird, but
Yeah. It's funny you say your mama gave you Jerry Jeff Walker, because mine gave me Ragweed, and that like shaped the whole country side of my music taste. I mean, it really did. She also gave me Ozzy, and I got way too into Black Sabbath for a long
but Sabbath
time.
is so good.
So good. There for a while, I was walking around like, Dio's the better Sabbath frontman, which is just ridiculous
that is
to think of
ridiculous.
as
Do
an
not
adult.
say that.
But I did love Ronnie James Dio so much. It was really right after he died. For like years, I was like, fuck Ozzy.
Well, that's because he was gone, probably.
Yeah.
But, even if you're not into, I mean, we're calling that metal, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Even if you're not into stuff like that, you cannot discount the greatness of Sabbath.
No, you cannot. Yeah. Yeah, my mom gave me a lot of music too. Well, gave me the roots to a lot of my music as well.
And it's kind of neat to expound on that, as you grow up and form into your own self.
Yeah.
But yeah, parents, be careful what you listen to, because
Dude, Holden's gonna have such a good taste in music.
yeah.
So, what happened to your mom?
So my mother had breast cancer, and she had a specific type called inflammatory breast cancer. Oftentimes it presents by growing on the outside. She sat and watched it for a couple of years before she ever went to the doctor. I didn't know anything about it until it got so big that I could see it through her shirt, which I think is what forced her to go to the doctor, is because I was like, Mom, what is going on with that? So she was diagnosed at stage 3 in May, around her birthday. And she did all these treatments and did chemo, and we watched it shrink visibly on the outside of her body. We were very encouraged. We thought she was going to make it, and then it went to her brain. And that's what ultimately got her, was the cancer had gone to her brain. She kind of lost her mind for a few days. And when I started noticing like the cognitive stuff being different, I made her go to the emergency room. And she was with it enough that she could answer questions because she wanted to go home. And then the doctor finally looked at me and said, you have to say the words that your mother's not right. And I told him, my mother is not right. And he said, okay, I believe you. And we're going to keep her overnight and run these tests and everything. She was in the hospital. All of that is kind of a blur.
Yeah.
She was in the hospital for a few days. And then the doctor came in and said, you got 7 to 10 days to live, and there's not anything we can do for you, and we're going to send you home on hospice. And that's what they did. I will tell you that I will never forget our hospice nurse, Rick.
Mm-hmm.
He was so good, and I am so thankful for everyone that works in that industry. Hospice volunteers, administration staff, down to, I didn't know this until this happened with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Some dude just shows up at your house sometimes at 10 o'clock at night with a bunch of medicine. You know, like, I was sitting on the porch waiting on him. It's 10:30 at night. This dude gets out of this like Toyota Corolla in a Grateful Dead shirt, hands me a bag of morphine. You know, that was real bizarre.
Yeah.
That whole time, that like week time period was real bizarre. She quit talking maybe 3 or 4 days in. I'm very thankful for my stepmother, Diane. My daddy was working offshore and he couldn't get back, and he sent my stepmother, who my mother liked, and Diane was a nurse at one time, and she came and helped, and I will forever be thankful for that. My partner at the time, Tim, I will forever be thankful for him helping me through all that. Like, it was bad, and I couldn't have done it by myself, and it was real easy to feel alone as an only child.
Yeah.
And my mother being unmarried, and, you know, she hadn't spoken to her family since 92, and
Right.
I kind of felt like I was doing all that by myself. But in actuality, I did have some help,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very thankful for that.
Well, you've told me before that it made you feel like your life force was leaving.
Oh, that's exactly what it felt like. When my mother died, it felt like my life force had been snuffed out.
I mean, that was the source of life, you know? I mean,
Yep. We set her hospital bed up in that front bedroom of the house.
so she passed in the Hawkins house.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which is a beautiful, like a pretty little house. I
Oh,
mean, it's such a cute
It's a
little
cute
house.
little Queen Anne bungalow. It's adorable.
Awesome. I love that house.
But I mean, I go in the front room and it's fine. But we set her, and that was my room. That wasn't even her room.
So,
But we set her hospital bed up in there, and I set it up to where I slept at the foot of my bed. Her bed was right next to it. I slept at the foot of my bed so that I could, you know, lay eyes on her. And I could touch her. And I remember one time before she quit talking, but she couldn't get out of the bed.
mm-hmm.
I had my hand laying kind of on her leg, and she was rifling, pilfering around, looking for her little dog. I don't know what that was about. Brain cancer, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
She was pilfering around looking for her little dog, and she grabbed my hand, and she pulled back real quick because it startled her, and she went, "Savannah, quit messing with me." Yeah, so that's how that went. And when she passed, it was in the wee hours of the night. You know, the hospice people told me people pass between like midnight and 4 a.m. and they do.
Yeah.
And I remember I could hear some kerfuffle, and I kind of opened my eyes and looked at her, and about that time, this black stuff, just like exorcism style, just comes out of her mouth, and I went, okay, this is it. This is what is happening. And then she passed, and I called the hospice people like you're supposed to, and they say, okay, what funeral home are we calling? And I used the funeral home around the corner because it was the only name of a funeral home I could think of, because I'm not from here.
When you pass it every day.
Yeah, you pass it
going
every
anywhere.
day, that's
Yeah.
right. And my now boss and good friend co-worker came and picked my mama up.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked over there the next day to make arrangements. And I was scared to death. I was all by myself. I was scared to death. And I didn't know, I'd never done this.
Right.
I'm 33 years old, so I walk in there and I open the door and I see this woman from my barista days named Linda Alvarez, and she was always so sweet to me, and I liked her. I didn't know her real well, but she was a good customer, and I liked her, and I opened the door, and I didn't even know she worked at the funeral home. And there stood Linda Alvarez. She was a pre-need counselor, so it wasn't even her job to deal with me. And she held my hand and sat through all of the arrangements with me, and I was so out of it to the point that the funeral director would ask me a question and I would turn and answer Linda, you know. So Linda's no longer with us. May her memory be a blessing.
Yeah.
And she really was to me. And all these years later, here I sit now working at that same funeral home. And that's kind of what I strive to do every day.
Yeah.
You know, be the Linda Alvarez that somebody might need. I'm so thankful for her. There's so many people along the way throughout all of this that I'm so thankful for. I'm so thankful for my lodge, my Rebecca Lodge. They helped me quite a bit through all of that. I'll tell you this, that I didn't really get off the couch much for a year.
Yeah.
It was real hard on me. Some of that is probably because we had a bunch of unresolved issues. And on about year 3, I decided to get some professional help. I went and saw a counselor, and I saw him maybe 5 or 6 times before he told me, there is not anything wrong with you. I cannot keep taking your money. You need time. That's all you need. You just need time. You're trying to speed through this grief process. And he was right, you know.
Yeah.
I was at my wit's end. I would have done anything to quit just being so sad, but you can outrun grief.
No, you cannot.
You cannot outrun it.
Yeah.
So, when you're in that situation and you feel desperate, just know that all you need is time and you're okay.
You really do. My wife lost a really close friend last year, and it's been her first experience with grief. And I mean, you really need time. I think the best thing you can do is kind of turn towards the memories when they come, and like try not to run away from stuff. Try not to avoid things that remind you of them. I mean, I really think you should like run right into that stuff.
Oh, lean into it.
Lean into it as hard as you can, because that is, eventually it doesn't hurt every time you think about them. I mean, it really doesn't. It doesn't bring you to tears every time you hear a song that makes them pop into your head. And the only way through that is to not avoid those songs and not avoid those things that do cause you to feel that way initially.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and also the other thing about grief, there's no right or wrong way to do it.
No.
You just have to do it. However, like Jerry Jeff says, you just got to do it like you know it. Do it however it is you have to do it.
Yeah.
That was probably, Dr. Bob, that was probably, as simple as that is, that was probably the best thing that I could have heard in that time period, you know, is you just need time. I also had a good friend tell me that when you feel yourself slipping down into the depths of it, go look at some art.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, that first year, well, I mean, hell, even now, but I looked at a lot of art. I bought a lot of art. I have a thing for art environments,
Yeah.
so I visited all that I could. That's, I don't know if it's anything really revolutionary.
No, but it gets your
But
brain
that's right.
thinking about something else. And, you know, that's super, anything that can, which is the opposite of what I just said, but anything that can kind of distract you or draw you out of a hole, use it,
Yeah.
you know?
I saw a bumper sticker one time that said, "How much art can you take?" And I took that as a challenge.
Yeah.
You know?
As a person that's been inside your house, yes, you did.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I took that as a challenge. How much art can you take? But it's healing, and
Yeah.
you're right, it does. It kind of rewires your brain, and it gives you some serotonin boost. And,
Yeah. I mean, it forces you to think about other things, and especially if it's moving in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's good to feel your feels, even when they're bad.
Yeah.
You know, don't
run from it.
don't run from it. It can be good.
Yeah.
It can be healing in itself.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to Sis.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, when I was going through her stuff. First of all, I didn't go through her stuff for a long time. But my mother kept she was real sentimental. And she also kept almost every piece of mail she ever got.
Yeah.
And when I was going through her stuff, I found this manila folder that had the birth chart, astrology.
Right.
It had the birth chart of every person that was ever important to her, with little notes in the margins and all that. That was kind of neat to find. I found this old envelope from 2014, before she even got sick, before all kinds of badness happened. I found this envelope where she had scribbled on it, "Fate and chance happen to us all." And I just want to know what made her write that down. Like, that was kind of an odd thing.
Yeah.
For my mother to, that's from the Bible. And my mother was not really a particularly biblical person.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting to find. I found an old boot box full of every love letter she ever received back from her, even her high school boyfriend, Mark Fletcher. Like, I like to say that my mother was good at everything except for feelings, but that's not really true. My mother felt very deeply.
Yeah.
She was a very sentimental person. And she was a lot softer than she would ever admit to being.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where I get that from.
Yeah.
So, Sissy Williams.
May her memory be a blessing.
That's right.